Hi there, it's Kelley from the KML team at Royal LePage. Just reaching out to let you know a little bit more about my adventure in Ecuador this year. I'm going to be climbing Mount Cotopaxi, 5 days, 12,303 feet above sea level, hiking up to 20 kilometers per day, camping overnight, putting myself into scary situations, all to raise money for the women's shelters locally. Really excited for this adventure because what it allows me to do is raise some money for a much needed cause. And that is through the Royal LePage Shelter Foundation. We're raising money to support women's shelters locally in our area and also helping to support education programs for kids so that they can learn what healthy relationships look like. Since 1988, the Royal LePage Shelter Foundation has raised $38 million and counting, supporting over 200 women's shelters across the country. Violence doesn't discriminate. It happens to women in all races, cultures, age brackets. It doesn't think about it. Across Canada, more than half of the women nationally have experienced at least one episode of violence, physically or sexually, in their life if they are over the age of 16. Every 6 days in Canada, a woman is murdered by her intimate partner. These are just a few of the reasons that myself and 119 other Royal LePage agents are going to be trekking in Ecuador this November. We are blessed to be able to work in a community and help people find homes that we want to be able to give back in another way and help people who are at risk of violence in their own home find a safe haven. I thought I'd take a couple minutes and share with you just some of my thoughts on previous treks that I've taken and kind of give you an idea of what I'm expecting for this trek in Ecuador. In 2017, I trekked 100 kilometers through the highlands of Iceland. It was quite the adventure. We climbed a snow bridge, we climbed a volcano, we climbed a mountain, we crossed a river. There were points where the river was so high we couldn't necessarily wear pants to get across. The river waters were moving so fast we had to link arms to make sure everybody made it across safely. It was by far one of the most exciting adventures of my life. I was in situations I didn't think I would ever put myself in or survive if I ended up in them. For example, kind of hanging off the side of a mountain, trying to get up over the edge, climbing a little bit of rappelling down the side of a little cavern, walking through a snow bridge and finding my foot went through further than I would have liked, up to my knee, and worrying if there was, how much more there was underneath that. Camping, not a camper, but got through 5 days of that. So it's something that has really stuck with me, and the challenges that I face there can't nearly be what people face when they're in a violent relationship or a violent situation. But it definitely has been a worthwhile cause given the amount of money we've been able to raise. I enjoy these treks for that reason. In that first trek that I did, it wasn't the first one Royal LePage did, but it was the first I did. We raised just over $655,000, 3 groups of 30 people. So that those are all realtors or partners of realtors that trekked through Iceland. Then in November 2019, I trekked through the Sahara Desert, 100 kilometers across sands, up sand dunes, mostly repeating the same terrain sort of over and over and over again. Sand doesn't change its form very often, but when it does, it becomes like, I imagine the surface of the moon might be like a crater-filled, hard, crunchy surface to soft sand. Lots of beautiful views, really hot temperatures. People experienced a lot of blisters during that trek. So the hardest part was just keeping your feet dry, keeping them safe so that you could continue to walk. We did 5 nights of camping, again, out in the middle of the desert in tents that were open all around except above us. So they're open to the ground below, which inspired us one night to just pull our mattresses out and sleep under the Milky Way, which was a really fantastic experience. It's nice that we can have these little moments together as a group, bonding, because we're helping pull each other through the day, the next day. And at the end of that trek, we raised over $1.1 million. Again, that would be shared nationally amongst the local shelters that the agents trekking are supporting. During the pandemic in 2021, Royal LePage put on another trek for shelter. This time it was a little bit different because we had to stay locally. We only wanted to travel within Canada, had a fabulous time doing that. Because of the terrain that we were climbing, we had to actually be flown in by helicopter, dropped off at the starting point. We hiked for 5 days, climbing up and down mountains of all different shapes and sizes and terrains. Sometimes they were snowy, sometimes they were brittle, like slate rock that as you were going down the hill, it would slide out from under your feet. So you kind of had to act like you were skiing to keep going upright. Definitely slippy and trippy the whole way. That was something that we talked about every time we would be, oh, this is a little bit slippy, this is a little bit trippy. At the end of that trek, there were only 90 of us that did that, and we were again over $1 million in the amount of money that we raised. So very exciting to be able to be a part of these challenges that are raising big amounts of money with the effort of the agents that are climbing these mountains. My trek is entirely self-funded. I pay for myself to get to Ecuador, to go on the adventure itself, to get back home, and everything in between. I'll be hosting lots of fundraisers and things to raise money for the actual shelter itself. My minimum requirement to qualify to go on this trek is I have to raise $6,000. If I don't raise $6,000 before November, I've paid for my trek and I don't get to go. So I'm making sure that that happens one way or the other. I've also set a bit of a higher goal for myself because I know my expenses are going to be really high for myself to go. I want to make sure I'm raising at least as much money as I'm spending. My goal, stretch goal for this trek is $10,000. I'm hoping that by November, I will have enough sponsorships, money raised through different fundraisers to be able to donate $10,000 to the local shelters within London, St. Thomas, and Strathroy. 20% of that money actually goes to national programs to help youth determine what a healthy relationship looks like.
Hi, my name is Heather, and I'm the Fund Development and Communications Manager at Innova. We're so grateful for the ongoing support from the Royal LePage Shelter Foundation and from individuals such as Kelley, who is doing the Ecuador Challenge for Shelter. Innova is much more than a shelter. We offer services in outreach, sexual assault counseling, education, and advocacy. But today we're going to talk about the shelter services supported by the Royal LePage Shelter Foundation. Our shelter housed 451 women and children last year. We operate the largest high-security shelter in Ontario. It's important that we receive funds from community and donors such as Royal LePage because although we have ministry funding for our shelter beds, it does not cover all the expenses. Some of the extras that we need to find funding for are things such as our children's programming, food and dietary needs, furniture, upkeep and maintenance, and unexpected things that come up. Our ministry funding for women's shelter and for shelters across Ontario hasn't increased in 10 years. So you can appreciate with the cost of living increases that this continues to provide challenges as we look to meet the needs of survivors that need space. As much as we've been able to offer shelter in the past year, it's important to know that we received 1,902 calls where we had to say that we didn't have space. You can imagine how it would feel to be in a dangerous situation and reaching out for help, to be told that you have to call back the next day. This is why we rely on support from our community so that we can continue to invest in programming that meets the needs of survivors. Some of the things that the funds that we've received from Royal LePage cover, we recently got a grant that is going to help replace one of our refrigeration units, and it meets some of our day-to-day needs that aren't covered by our ministry funding. So the funds that Kelley's raising through the Ecuador Challenge for Shelter will go to support some of the needs that aren't covered by our other funding sources. Some of the things you may not realize is that we often have to use taxis as transportations for residents to get to appointments or for children to get to school. We also have an ongoing need to replace and repair furniture. You can imagine with people coming and going all of the time, it takes its toll on some of the physical items in our space. So the funds raised through this challenge will help us to meet those needs and create a space that is both safe and warm and welcoming for the folks that need to stay with us. If you're interested in more information about our programs and services, or if you need to reach out for help, you can find more information on our website at www.innovafuture.org. And we're also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can find us by searching for Innova Future. Thank you so much for your support.